Can you solve all these chromatography questions? Haplex stands for. Right again. High-performance liquid chromatography is a valid answer. TELX stands for. Valid point. Thin layer chromatography is true. TELF stands for dash. On track. Thin layer chromatography is the correct answer. Choose the odd one out. Excellent. Thick layer chromatography is a brilliant choice. Plus in Indonesian is dash. Nicely done. High-performance liquid chromatography is a solid answer. Chromatography is used for. Excellent choice. Separation of mixture is the right answer. APUSI is an abbreviation for. Correct. High-pressure liquid chromatography is the right answer. The word chromatography means. Great thinking. Color writing is the right choice. What does chromatography mean? Good job. Your answer, color separation, works well here. Who discovered chromatography? Exactly. Mikhail Svet makes sense and it is right choice. HEPLIF is an abbreviation of dash. You're right. High-performance liquid chromatography is the correct answer. An example of a mobile phase is. Solid response. Ethanol is a valid choice. He coined the word chromatography. Sharp thinking. Sweat is the right choice. What is the passage mainly about? Well picked. Paper chromatography is the correct answer. Gas chromatography could be performed. Smart pick. Only in columns is the correct choice. A term which means color writing. Clear logic. Your choice chromatography is sound and 100% true. Column chromatography is a type of. Perfect. Adsorption chromatography is the correct choice. Principle of column chromatography. Well reasoned. Adsorption is the correct choice. TELFI or thin layer chromatography is. Great job. Adsorption chromatography is the accurate answer. The chromatography paper is a dash. Nice selection. Stationary phase is the correct and valid answer. Name the types of a chromatography. Good thinking. GC, TELC is the right answer. What is the heart of HPLC instrument? You chose column, and it is correct. Liquid chromatography is an example of. Well done. Column chromatography is the right choice. Chromatography is used to separate dash. Smart move. Mixtures is an accurate answer. Ink can be separated by a method of dash. Strong choice. Chromatography is the right answer. A chromatography system consists of dash. Correct response. Mobile and stationary phases is the most accurate answer. TALC is also known as dash chromatography. You got it. Your choice adsorption is right. What is chromatography used to separate? Right choice. Soluble substances is the best answer. Chromatography involves two mutually dash. Nice work. You chose immiscible phases, and it is correct. Sorption mechanism in paper chromatography. Bravo! Partition is the answer. The paper used for paper chromatography is... Great thinking. Whatman, no one is the right choice. Chromatography separates a mixture of dash. Correct response. Solutes is the most accurate answer. What is an example of paper chromatography? Smart move. Food testing is an accurate answer. Basis of separation for paper chromatography. Strong choice. Polarity is the right answer. This method requires the use of a condenser. Good thinking. Distillation is the right answer. Which force is involved in the chromatography? Valid point. All of the above is true. Pulse is a type of chromatography referring to... You chose high-performance liquid chromatography. And it is correct. What would be the best title for this passage? Clear logic. Your choice chromatography is sound and 100% true. What is used to label the chromatography paper? Right choice. Pencil is the best answer. Descending chromatography is favored by dash. Sharp thinking. Gravity is the right choice. What is the paper used in chromatography called? Nice work. You chose stationary phase, and it is correct. Stationary phase in paper chromatography is dash. You're right. Water is the correct answer. Gas chromatography is used in the separation of... Smart pick. Volatile liquids is the correct choice. What are the two phases called in chromatography? Bravo! Mobile and stationary is the answer. In paper chromatography, paper sheets are used as... Perfect. Adsorbent is the correct choice. The word chromatography originated from the words. Solid response. Chromocolor is a valid choice. Which of the following is not a stationary phase? Correct. Solid-solid chromatography is the right answer. It is the immobilized component of chromatography. You got it. Your choice stationary phase is right. What are the different modes of our chromatography? Well picked. GCLC. Cis for C is the correct answer. What are the applications of paper chromatography? Well reasoned. Separating and analyzing mixtures is the correct choice. Two-dimensional chromatography can be divided into... On track. 2 is the correct answer. What is the final product of chromatography called? Nice selection. Chromatogram is the correct and valid answer. What was the support used in column chromatography? Right again. Glass wool plug is a valid answer. Gel permeation chromatography was first developed in... Exactly. 1955 makes sense, and it is right choice. Which one is industry commonly using chromatography? Nicely done. Pharmaceutical is a solid answer. What is the principle for thin layer chromatography? Excellent choice. Partition is the right answer. In case of chromatography, the solvent risen up due to... Well done. Capillary action is the right choice. What is the stationary phase in paper chromatography? Excellent. The paper is a brilliant choice. What is the liquid part of the chromatography setup? Great job. Solvent is the accurate answer. Paper chromatography, which one corresponds to English? Good job. Your answer, paper chromatography, works well here. Which is the correct method to separate colored dyes? Great job. Chromatography is the accurate answer. What can the mobile phase consist of in chromatography? Excellent choice. Gas only is the right answer. What are the two important phases of chromatography? Solid response. Mobile and stationary phase is a valid choice. The mobile phase in paper chromatography is typically a... Well done. Liquid is the right choice. Which type of chromatography is discussed in the video? Nicely done. Paper chromatography is a solid answer. The output of a chromatography procedure is known as a... Smart move. Chromatogram is an accurate answer. Which method has a solid and a gas as the final products? Strong choice. Evaporation is the right answer. In chromatography, why is a pencil used to draw the line? Nice selection. It's insoluble is the correct and valid answer. Ion exchange chromatography is used for the separation of. Sharp thinking. Polar molecules is the right choice. In ion exchange chromatography, hydrophobic molecules dash. Perfect. Cannot be separated is the correct choice. What is the principle of separation in gas chromatography? Good job. Your answer, partition, works well here. Name the technique to separate the components of a colloid. Bravo, centrifugation is the answer. The spotting agent for amino acids in paper chromatography. You got it? Your choice, nenhydrin, is right. Which type of chromatography uses a gas as the mobile phase? Right choice. Gas is the best answer. The following are all applications of chromatography except. Exactly. Social science makes sense and it is right choice. What mechanism of separation occurs in paper chromatography? You chose partition, and it is correct. Which type of chromatography is used to separate dyes in ink? Good thinking. Paper chromatography is the right answer. In reverse phase chromatography, the stationary phase is made. Nice work. You chose nonpolar and it is correct. In size exclusion chromatography, separation is based on dash. Excellent. Molecular size is a brilliant choice. The formation of crystals as a dissolved substance solidifies. Right again. Crystallization is a valid answer. The liquid part of the chromatography apparatus is called the... Clear logic. Your choice solvent is sound and 100% true. Ion exchange chromatography separates which type of molecules? Correct. Ions and polar molecules is the right answer. What is the proper way to hold a piece of chromatography paper? Oh. Well picked. By the sides is the correct answer. Dyes in water-soluble markers may be separated by means of dash. Valid point. Chromatography is true. In paper chromatography, the solvent rises to the top chiefly by. On track. Capillary force is the correct answer. Which is the mobile phase for column chromatography experiments? You're right. Ethanol is the correct answer. Following types of chromatography calibration method except dash. Well reasoned. Weight percent is the correct choice. Based on a normal chromatography, the stationary phase is polar. Great thinking. True is the right choice. Which type of chromatography uses paper as the stationary phase? Smart pick. Paper chromatography is the correct choice. Which of the following is the most common type of chromatography? Correct response. Paper chromatography is the most accurate answer. What is used to draw a straight line on the chromatography paper? Or smart move. Pencil is an accurate answer. In gas chromatography, what is typically used as the mobile phase? Strong choice. Gas is the right answer. Chromatography separates the mixture of dyes on the basis of their. Nicely done. Solubility is a solid answer. Which of the following is not a column-type liquid chromatography? Bravo. Paper is the answer. Which type of filter paper are mostly used in paper chromatography? Well reasoned. Whatman filter paper is the correct choice. Which is the stationary phase for paper chromatography experiments? Clear logic. Your choice paper is sound and 100% true. Which of the following mixtures are separated by chromatography? Sharp thinking. All the above is the right choice. What is the solvent or mixture of solvents in chromatography called? On track. Mobile phase is the correct answer. Which of the following can be used for size exclusion chromatography? Well done. All of the above is the right choice. Chromatography is a technique used to separate and analyze compounds. Great thinking. Complex mixtures is the right choice. Which gas is commonly used as the carrier gas in gas chromatography? Good thinking. Hydrogen is the right answer. Which of the following must be part of the process of chromatography? Correct. Solvent is the right answer. What do you call the resulting paper after chromatography experiment? Valid point. Chromatogram is true. The physical separation of mixtures into individual components is dash. You got it. Your choice chromatography is right. Which separation technique is used to obtain pure water from seawater? Solid response. Simple distillation is a valid choice. The color pattern on the paper in paper chromatography is called dash. Excellent. Chromatogram is a brilliant choice. Chromatography separates a mixture of dyes based on how dash they are. Great job. Soluble is the accurate answer. Chromatography relies on the dissolved substances having different dash. Excellent choice. Solubility is the right answer. What is method used to separate and identify the compounds in a mixture? Well picked. Chromatography technique is the correct answer. Identify the layers formed in column chromatography. Exactly. Erythrocyanatotrazine brocrysol, green brocrysol, purple makes sense, and it is right choice. How is our chromatography different from other chromatography techniques? Smart pick. Detection method is the correct choice. Which of the following is not a detector in gas chromatography analysis? Nice work. You chose OV and it is correct. What is used to put a small spot of color onto the chromatography paper? Right again. Pen is a valid answer. Which of the following substances can be separated using chromatography? You chose all the above, and it is correct. In chromatography, the stationary phase can be dash, supported on a solid. Perfect. Solid or liquid is the correct choice. Which separation technique is used to obtain pure oxygen from liquid air? Right choice. Fractional distillation is the best answer. What are the key components required for conducting paper chromatography? Nice selection. Paper, solvent, sample, container is the correct and valid answer. In exclusion chromatography, solute molecules are separated based on dash. Good job. Your answer, molecular geometry and size, works well here. In chromatography, which of the following can the mobile phase be made of? Correct response. Liquid or gas is the most accurate answer. The stationary phase in gel filtration chromatography is often described as. You're right. The matrix is the correct answer. Name the separation method that causes wet clothes on a laundry line to dry. Great job. Evaporation is the accurate answer. Which polymer is often used for matrix materials in affinity chromatography? Correct. All of the above is the right answer. What is this? An impression or mark made on a surface by a person's fingertip. Correct response. Fingerprint is the most accurate answer. Chromatography separates the dye from the mixture on the basis of their dash. Nicely done. Solubility is a solid answer. Chromatography is a physical method that is used to separate and analyze dash. Good job. Your answer, complex mixtures, works well here. All of the following can be used in gas chromatography as mobile phase except. On track. Oxygen is the correct answer. In general, chromatography is a physical method that is used to separate dash. Well done. Complex mixtures is the right choice. Which method is usually used to separate colored substances from each other? You chose chromatography, and it is correct. Separates gaseous substances in a calibrated column into different components. Good thinking. Gas chromatography is the right answer. Which among the following is never used in gas chromatography as mobile phase? Perfect. Oxygen is the correct choice. Which gas is the least suitable as a carrier gas in gas-liquid chromatography? Excellent choice. Oxygen is the right answer. Mobile phase used for separation of CO2 plus and Ni2 plus ions by paper chromatography. Strong choice. Acetone water conceal is the right answer. Chromatography depends upon the different dash of the substances in a solvent. Solid response. Solubility is a valid choice.
Chromatography works if all the substances in the mixture dash in one solvent.
Well picked. Dissolve is the correct answer. In ion exchange chromatography, the molecules are separated based on their dash. You got it. Your choice charge is right. Among the 3 specimens for paper chromatography, which is subjected to UV light. Excellent. Plant extract is a brilliant choice. Give an example for a cation exchange resin used in ion exchange chromatography. You're right. Methyl sulfonate is the correct answer.
Chromatography is a technique scientists use to separate dash into their parts.
Nice work. You chose mixtures and it is correct. The type of chromatography where the cellulose of paper is used as the adsorbent. Bravo. Paper chromatography is the answer. Which of the following is a technique used to separate mixtures in chromatography? Right again. Distillation is a valid answer. What is the physical separation of a mixture into its individual components called? Oh. Clear logic. Your choice chromatography is sound and 100% true. 2 or more substances that are mixed together but not chemically combined is a dash. Nice selection. Mixture is the correct and valid answer. This method separates substances due to differences in the sizes of their particles. Right choice. Filtration is the best answer. The gas-solid chromatography is dash chromatography as basic principle involved? Exactly. Adsorption makes sense, and it is right choice. What is the primary advantage of paper chromatography in identifying key components? Sharp thinking, minimal equipment required is the right choice. Which of the following mobile phase must be used with cautions in gas chromatography? Valid point. He is true. The following compounds that can be analyzed using the chromatography method are dash. Great thinking. KO3 in iodized salt is the right choice. Which method of separation would you use to separate an insoluble solid from a liquid? Well reasoned. Filtration is the correct choice. Which of the following is used for analyte quantification in a column chromatography? Smart pick. Peak area is the correct choice. Which type of chromatography would be best for separating pigments in a plant extract? Smart move. Paper chromatography is an accurate answer. Which among the following is the least or weakest polar solvent used in chromatography? Strong choice. Hexane is the right answer. How would you separate a mixture of 2 liquids that mix together perfectly? Great thinking. Distillation is the right choice. What is this? Is an analytical method used to separate colored chemicals or substances. Bravo. Paper chromatography is the answer. Photosynthetic pigments that present in Soropus sp can be separated by dash technique.
Correct. Chromatography is the right answer. It is a technique or method used to separate mixtures of dissolved chemicals, substances.
You're right. Chromatography is the correct answer.
Which forms of chromatography use RT values? I paper chromatography I tilkey please EVGC.
You got it. Your choice EE and AV is right.
The process used to separate heterogeneous mixtures of solids and liquids is called DASH.
Good thinking. Filtration is the right answer.
Which method of separation removes the solvent from a solution, leaving behind the solute? On track. Evaporation boiling is the correct answer. In chromatography, the value used to determine the rate at which compound moves is called.
Well picked. Retention factor is the correct answer. Which technique is commonly used to analyze metal ions and organic compounds in solutions? Clear logic. Your choice, liquid chromatography, is sound and 100% true.
Which of the following cannot be used as an adsorbent in column adsorption chromatography?
Right again. Potassium permanganate is a valid answer.
Which of the following is not commonly used as a carrier gas in gas chromatography systems?
Good job. Your answer, xenon, works well here.
Russian botanist who developed the technique is referred to as the father of chromatography. Great job. T-sweat is the accurate answer. The difference between the traditional column chromatography and flash column chromatography.
Exactly. Use of positive pressure makes sense, and it is right choice.
In gas chromatography, the time taken for a substance to travel through the column is called.
Nice selection. Retention time is the correct and valid answer. Using a salt gradient is most commonly used to elute proteins in which chromatography method? Sharp thinking. Ion exchange is the right choice.
In gel filtration chromatography, separation of proteins are based on their. Excellent. Size and shape is a brilliant choice. Which of the following techniques separates various colored components of black colored ink?
Correct response. Chromatography is the most accurate answer. Which separation technique would you use to find out how many pigments are contained in grass?
Well done. Chromatography is the right choice.
Chromatographic technique that is used in the detection of pesticides and insecticides in food.
Smart move. Thin layer chromatography is an accurate answer.
The following column chromatography systems use pressure to flow the mobile phase, except dash.
You chose open column chromatography, and it is correct.
Separation of substances using column chromatography techniques. Which is the stationary phase?
Nicely done. Silica gel is a solid answer.
Sample substances to be analyzed using gas chromatography techniques. What status must you be in?
Nice work. You chose gas status, and it is correct.
A pattern formed on an adsorbent medium by the layers of components separated by chromatography.
Solid response. A chromatogram is a valid choice.
What is the collective term for a family of laboratory techniques for the separation of mixtures?
Valid point. Chromatography is true.
The common solvent for paper chromatography, butanol, acetic acid, water, is used in the ratio.
Smart pick. Fork 15 is the correct choice.
Chromatography is generally used for the separation of mixtures based on the differences in there.
Right choice. All of the above is the best answer. The solvent that carries the components that pass through a chromatography column is known as the
Excellent choice. Eluent is the right answer.
Investigators use dash chromatography when identifying unknown plant pigments and other compounds. Perfect. Liquid is the correct choice.
Which reagent is commonly used to visualize the separated amino acids on the chromatography paper? Well reasoned. Nanhydrin is the correct choice.
The type of chromatography which seeks to measure the relative proportions of analytes in mixtures. Great thinking. Analytical chromatography is the right choice.
A technique for separating the components of a mixture using a mobile phase and a stationary phase.
Nicely done. Chromatography is a solid answer. And which of the following methods are liquid samples injected into the column in gas chromatography? Good job. Your answer, microsyringe, works well here. In size exclusion chromatography, the stationary phase is a porous matrix made up of compounds like. Nice selection. All the above is the correct and valid answer.
Which of the following methods could be used to check the molecular weight of your purified protein?
Smart move. Steve's page is an accurate answer. The smallest unit of textile material that has a length many times greater than its diameter is dash. You chose fibers, and it is correct. What is the appropriate distance to mark the origin line from the bottom of the chromatography paper?
Smart pick. 1 cm is the correct choice.
Which chromatography technique is used for the separation of amino acids, proteins, and carbohydrates?
Great job. Thin layer chromatography is the accurate answer.
This method separates dissolved substances based on differences in how well they dissolve in a solvent. Excellent. Chromatography is a brilliant choice. What is the nature of stationary phase used for separation of CO2 plus and Ne2 plus ions by paper chromatography? Good thinking. Liquid is the right answer.
The following are the characteristics of high-performance thin layer chromatography, except dash. Well done. Higher plate height is the right choice.
In size exclusion chromatography, a wide separation between components as they exit the column represents. Well reasoned. Good resolution is the correct choice. Which type of gas chromatography injector allows all of the sample to pass through the column for loading?
Excellent choice. Spliteless injector is the right answer.
The pattern formed on the chromatography by the layers of components separated by chromatography is called.
Valid point. Chromatogram is true.
Dash utilizes a stationary and a mobile phase to separate mixtures based on their affinity for each phase. Exactly. Chromatography makes sense, and it is right choice.
The process of passing a mobile phase through a chromatography column is called which one of the following?
Perfect. Elution is the correct choice.
When the chromatography paper is placed in the solvent should be dash, the starting pencil line. On track. Below is the correct answer. The technique in gas chromatography, where in an analysis several experimental temperatures are set, is called. Correct. Temperature programming is the right answer.
The thermal conductivity and flame ionization are the two most common dash on gas chromatography.
Nice work. You chose detectors, and it is correct.
Which of these techniques is often considered a suitable polishing step in a protein purification strategy?
Right choice. Size exclusion chromatography is the best answer. Which method of separation will separate two or more solutes from a solution?
Correct response. Chromatography is the most accurate answer.
Which of the following is not a highly specific biological interaction to be used in affinity chromatography?
Well picked. Cations anions is the correct answer.
Which chromatography method relies on specific binding between a protein and a complementary substratic ligand?
Right again. Affinity is a valid answer.
The chromatography component that receives the buffer from pumps and mix it to form a linear or step gradient.
Clear logic. Your choice mixer is sound and 100% true.
In gas chromatography, the basis for separation of the components of the volatile material is the difference in
sharp thinking. Partition coefficients is the right choice. A chromatography experiment uses water as a mobile phase. Which of the following would have the highest AF value?
You got it?
Your choice ethanol is right.
In gas-liquid phase chromatography, the stationary phase is composed of dash and the mobile phase is made of a dash.
Solid response. Liquid gas is a valid choice.
In paper chromatography, what is responsible for the movement of the mobile phase upward into the stationary phase?
Bravo! Capillary action is the answer.
Which forms of chromatography give qualitative and quantitative results? I paper chromatography, ITE pleasive GC?
You're right. IE and AV is the correct answer.
What two properties affect the rot of a compound in paper chromatography? I size weight, E polarity, E melting point.
Strong choice. I and I is the right answer.
What is the appropriate solvent to use in ascending paper chromatography for separating and identifying amino acids?
Excellent. Butanol acetic acid water is a brilliant choice.
Dash chromatography can be used to separate the components of inks, dyes, plant compounds, makeup, and other substances.
Smart move. Paper is an accurate answer.
Dash is a liquid column chromatographic method of separating solute molecules according to differences in molecular size.
On track. Gel filtration is the correct answer.
Which technique is commonly used in biochemistry to separate and identify different types of molecules, including amino acids?
You're right. Paper chromatography is the correct answer.
Which method is this a picture of?
Solid response. Chromatography is a valid choice.
Dash chromatography is used to determine the chemical composition of unknown substances, such as the different compounds in gasoline.
Well reasoned. Gas is the correct choice.
Dash chromatography uses thin plastic or glass trays to identify the composition of pigments, chemicals, and other unknown substances.
Correct response. Thin layer is the most accurate answer.
Ink can be separated by a method of dash.
Good thinking. Chromatography is the right answer.
Which chromatographic technique depends on the highly specific interactions between pairs of biological material such as enzyme substrate.
Nicely done. Affinity chromatography is a solid answer.
This setup is part of the technique known as
Strong choice. Chromatography is the right answer. What is the name of this separation technique? Right choice. Filtration is the best answer.
the stationary phase in this experiment is dash.
Good job. Your answer chromatography paper works well here.
Pattern on the paper in chromatography is called dash.
Smart pick. Chromatogram is the correct choice.
In paper chromatography, what is the stationary phase?
Nice work. You chose paper, and it is correct.
What type of chromatography is depicted by the illustration?
Well done. Size exclusion is the right choice.
Dyes in water-soluble markers may be separated by means of dash.
You got it? Your choice chromatography is right.
What is the process called which is used to separate solutions?
Excellent choice. Distillation is the right answer.
Which pigment is the least soluble in the chromatography solvent?
Great job. Chlorophyll B is the accurate answer.
You are again provided with an already done chromatography. Which substance is impure?
Right again. H is a valid answer.
This technique is based on the differences of the boiling point of the substance in the mixture.
Bravo. Distillation is the answer.
How you will get all these quiz questions in PDF books format.
Great thinking. Contact Narayan Changder is the right choice.